Hello Biology 202 students. Welcome to your online lecture. Today we're diving into the fascinating world of arteries, veins, and blood pressure. Understanding these components is crucial for anyone entering the health professions, as they play vital roles in maintaining our overall health and well-being. For today's agenda, we will be covering the structure and function of arteries, veins, and capillaries, after each of which we will talk about the pathologies associated with each. Then we will go into the anatomy you'll need to know for the arteries and veins of the arms, head, abdomen, and legs. Then we'll talk about how blood pressure is measured and the factors that influence it. After which we will talk about common pathologies related to blood vessels and blood pressure. Lastly, we'll talk about clinical applications, including taking accurate blood pressure readings. Let's start with a quick overview of the circulatory system. At the heart of this system, quite literally, is the heart itself. This incredible organ pumps blood throughout the body, delivering oxygen and nutrients to tissues and removing their waste products. But the heart doesn't work alone. It relies on a vast network of blood vessels, including arteries, veins, and capillaries to transport blood to every corner of the body. Arteries are the vessels that carry oxygen-rich blood away from the heart to the body's tissues. They have thick, elastic walls that can handle the high pressure of blood pumped by the heart. Veins return oxygen-poor blood back to the heart. Veins have thinner walls than arteries and often contain valves to prevent blood from flowing backwards. Capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, connecting arteries and veins. Capillaries are where the exchange of oxygen, nutrients, and waste products occurs between blood and tissues. Arteries are essential for transporting oxygen-rich blood from the heart to the rest of the body. Today we'll explore their structure, function, and the different types of arteries. The primary function of arteries is to carry oxygenated blood away from the heart to various parts of the body. The only exception to this is the pulmonary arteries, which carry oxygen-poor blood from the heart to the lungs for oxygenation. So really, arteries just carry blood away from the heart, and usually it's moving oxygen-rich blood to the tissues. Arteries have a unique structure that allows them to handle the high pressure of blood pumped from the heart. They consist of three main layers. First, we have the tunica intima. This is the innermost layer and is in direct contact with the blood. It consists of a single layer of endothelial cells that provide a smooth surface for blood flow. Then we have the tunica media. This is the middle layer, and it is made up of smooth muscle cells and elastic fibers. This layer is crucial for maintaining blood pressure and controlling blood flow through vasoconstriction and dilation. Lastly, we have the tunica externa, the outermost layer, also known as the tunica adventitia. It is composed of connective tissue. It provides structural support and protection to the artery. Now, the aorta is the largest artery in the body, with a diameter roughly equivalent to a garden hose. It originates from the left ventricle of the heart and distributes oxygenated blood to all parts of the body through its branches. The aorta's significant elasticity and strong tunica media make it perfectly suitable to handle the high pressure of blood ejected from the heart. There are different types of arteries. There are elastic arteries and muscular arteries. And this is not going to be on your test, but it will help you understand different types of arteries. Elastic arteries are the largest arteries in the body, such as the aorta. They contain more elastic fibers, allowing them to stretch and recoil. This feature allows them to maintain a relatively constant pressure gradient despite the constant pumping action of the heart. Then there's the muscular arteries. These are medium-sized arteries that distribute blood to specific body regions and organs. They have a higher proportion of smooth muscle in the tunica media, which allows for greater control over blood flow through vasoconstriction and vasodilation. Now, arteries can also split and branch out into smaller blood-carrying vessels. These are called arterioles. They provide blood to the organs and are chiefly composed of smooth muscle. The autonomic nervous system influences the diameter and shape of arterioles, and they respond to the tissue's need for more nutrients and oxygen. The most common arterial pathology is atherosclerosis. This condition involves the buildup of fatty deposits or plaque within the arterial walls. Plaque is composed of cholesterol, fatty substances, cellular waste products, calcium, and fibrin. Atherosclerosis begins with damage to the endothelium, the inner lining of the artery. This damage allows LDL cholesterol to penetrate the arterial wall. Over time, white blood cells attempt to digest the LDL, forming foam cells and leading to the accumulation of plaque. As plaque builds up, it narrows the artery, reducing blood flow and increasing the risk of a complete blockage. Atherosclerosis can affect any artery in the body, leading to various conditions such as coronary artery disease, carotid artery disease, and peripheral artery disease. The reduced blood flow can cause chest pain, shortness of breath, and in severe cases, heart attacks or strokes. Another related condition is arteriosclerosis. This refers to the general hardening and loss of elasticity in the arterial walls. This can occur naturally with aging, but is often exaggerated by hypertension or high blood pressure and other factors. Unlike atherosclerosis, arteriosclerosis involves the thickening and stiffening of the entire arterial wall. Lastly, we'll talk about an aneurysm. An aneurysm is an abnormal bulge in the wall of an artery. This occurs when the arterial wall weakens, often due to conditions like atherosclerosis or hypertension, otherwise known as high blood pressure. Aneurysms can occur in any artery, but are most common in the aorta. If an aneurysm ruptures, it can cause life-threatening internal bleeding. Several risk factors contribute to atrial pathologies, including high cholesterol, hypertension, smoking, diabetes, and a sedentary lifestyle. Preventative measures include maintaining a healthy diet, regular exercise, avoiding smoking, and managing chronic conditions. Capillaries are microscopic channels that supply blood to tissues through a process called perfusion. They facilitate the exchange of gases and other substances between blood and the surrounding cells. The diameter of capillaries ranges from 5 to 10 micrometers, just enough for a erythrocyte to squeeze through. This movement of blood through capillaries is known as microcirculation. The wall of a capillary consists of an endothelial layer surrounded by a basement membrane, sometimes with smooth muscle fibers. In larger capillaries, multiple endothelial cells line the lumen, while smaller ones may have a single cell layer that wraps around itself. To function effectively, capillary walls must be leaky to allow substances to pass through. There are three main types of capillaries distinguished by their permeability: continuous, fenestrated, and sinusoid capillaries. These different types of capillaries are not going to be on your test, but it will help you understand the function of capillaries. So we have our continuous capillaries. They're the most common type, and they're found in almost all vascularized tissue. They have complete endothelial linings with tight junctions, which are usually impermeable, but in capillaries they are incomplete, forming intercellular clefts. These clefts allow some small molecules like glucose, water, and gases to pass through. In the brain, continuous capillaries form the blood-brain barrier, with tight junctions preventing almost all substances from passing through. Then we have fenestrated capillaries. Fenestrated capillaries have pores in addition to tight junctions, making them permeable to large molecules. These capillaries are found in the small intestine, kidneys, choroid plexus of the brain, and various endocrine glands, facilitating nutrient absorption and filtration. The least common type is sinusoid capillaries. They are flattened with large gaps and incomplete basement membranes. These gaps allow the passage of large molecules, including cells. Blood flow through sinusoids is slow, enhancing the exchange of gases, nutrients, and wastes. Sinusoids are found in the liver, spleen, bone marrow, lymph nodes, and certain endocrine glands. These capillaries are crucial for functions such as new blood cell formation and protein processing. So then we get to veins and venules. Venules are the smaller version of veins, just like arterioles are smaller portions of arteries. So venules, unlike arteries, originate from capillaries and lead into veins. Venules are extremely small veins, typically 8 to 100 micrometers in diameter, connecting multiple capillaries existing from a capillary bed. Venules join together to form veins. Their walls consist of endothelium, a thin middle layer with a few muscle cells and elastic fibers, and an outer layer of connective tissue fibers, forming a very thin tunica externa. Veins are blood vessels that conduct blood towards the heart. Compared to arteries, veins have thin walls and large, irregular lumens. Due to their low pressure environment, larger veins are equipped with valves to ensure unidirectional blood flow and prevent backflow due to low pressure and gravity. Veins are classified into deep veins, which are located deep within muscle tissue, and superficial veins, which are closer to the skin's surface. Deep veins are situated within the muscle tissue and are usually accompanied by corresponding arteries. They play a crucial role in returning the majority of blood from the limbs to the heart. Superficial veins, on the other hand, are located just beneath the skin and are not paired with arteries. They are responsible for draining the skin and superficial tissues and play a role in thermal regulation by helping to regulate the body's temperature through blood flow adjustments. The existence of both deep and superficial veins allows for efficient blood drainage from various tissues. Superficial veins serve as accessible pathways for blood draws and intravenous therapy, while deep veins are more protected and thus handle a larger volume of blood under the influence of surrounding muscle contractions. So the calves are considered kind of a second heart. The muscles in the calves act as a secondary heart because they play a crucial role in assisting venous return from the lower limbs to the heart. When the calf muscles contract during activities such as walking, running, and even just standing, they compress the deep veins running through them. This compression propels the blood upwards against gravity and towards the heart. Valves in the veins ensure that blood does not flow backwards when the muscle is relaxed. This mechanism is essential because the venous pressure in the lower limbs is low, and the force of gravity can impede the return of blood to the heart. The efficient functioning of this muscle pump is crucial to maintain proper circulation and preventing blood from pooling in the lower extremities. So let's recap. Veins bring blood to the heart, and that tunica media is much thinner. Veins carry deoxygenated blood in the systemic circuit and oxygenated blood in the pulmonary circuit. Now, another thing is veins have valves in them, so there are valves preventing backflow. And another fact is that veins can act as blood reservoirs, holding about 64% of the blood volume at any given time. So when you're just sitting around, maybe studying, hopefully, there's a ton of blood. More than 60% of your blood is being stored in your veins. But if you were to go exercise, that drops significantly because your muscles are moving all that blood back to the heart and you get more circulation through the rest of your body. There are some disorders of the veins. Some important ones are edema and varicose veins. Varicose veins are very common, and edema occurs when fluid accumulates in tissues, often due to increased pressure in veins, causing fluid to leak from capillaries. Varicose veins, often found in the lower limbs, results from defective valves that allow blood to pool, causing veins to distend and twist. This can lead to pain and further complications if untreated. To study the blood flow of the arms and head, we need to look at the aortic arch and its branches. Here you can see the left and right common carotid, and here are the left and right subclavian arteries. So we'll start off with the right arm, and so we go to the right subclavian artery. So that will start there from the aortic arch, and then it'll actually come here, and it's called the subclavian because it goes underneath the clavicle. And then when it passes by the armpit or axillary region, we got the right axillary artery. Then here we go down to the right brachial artery, where it then splits into the right radial and ulnar arteries. So we have radial, which is by the radius, and the right ulnar, which is right by the right ulna. Let's trace the pathway of blood returning to the heart from the right arm, starting with the veins in the hand and moving up to the superior vena cava. Starting at the hand, we have the deep veins, the radial vein and the ulnar veins. These veins run alongside their corresponding arteries in the forearm. The radial vein is located on the lateral side of the forearm, while the ulnar vein runs on the median side. As we move up, the radial and ulnar veins unite to form the right brachial vein at the elbow. The brachial veins are deep veins that accompany the brachial artery through the arm. Remember, veins join, they unite, or they merge, because they are going from branched out into one single vessel known as the vena cava, where arteries branch out and separate because they are moving into smaller tissues. At the cubital fossa, the right median cubital vein connects the cephalic and basilic veins. This vein is often used for venipuncture due to its accessibility. So this is like when you get a blood draw, or if you've ever had an IV, this is where they typically will put them because it's easy to find this vein and it's a rather large vein and it's on the surface. Continuing upwards, the brachial vein and the basilic vein converge to form the right axillary vein in the armpit area. The axillary vein then travels through the axilla, collecting blood from the arm and the shoulder region. Branching off the axillary vein is the right cephalic vein. The cephalic vein is a major superficial vein that runs along the lateral aspect of the arm and empties into the axillary vein. As we move forward up, the axillary vein becomes the right subclavian vein as it passes under the clavicle. The subclavian vein plays a critical role in draining blood from the upper limb. Next, we have the external jugular vein here. That drains blood from the scalp and face. The external jugular vein merges into the subclavian vein. Additionally, it is important to note the right internal jugular vein. This vein drains blood from the brain, neck, and face, joining the subclavian vein to form the right brachiocephalic vein. The right brachiocephalic vein is formed by the union of the subclavian vein and the internal jugular vein. Both right and left brachiocephalic veins join to form the superior vena cava. Finally, the superior vena cava returns oxygen-poor blood to the right atrium of the heart, completing the pathway of venous blood return from the right arm. Now remember, all of these are also found on the left side. So in the test, if you see an artery or a vein, make sure you say it's left or right. So now let's talk about the arteries in the head and neck. But first, let's talk about where they originate. So we have the ascending aorta, which then branches off into the brachiocephalic trunk, which further splits into the subclavian artery, which we talked about, that goes to the right limb. And then we have the right common carotid. And this leads into another branching spot where it turns into the external and internal carotid. So the internal carotid is going to the brain and the external is going up to your face and your ear. So we actually have the superficial temporal artery here, which means by the temple. And that's all you'll need to know for the lab. Now let's talk about how blood drains the head and neck. And we'll start where the blood typically moves, right? So we had the arteries going up into the tissues, and now they're all going to drain. So let's start with the right superficial temporal vein right there. And these are pretty much exactly the same, except for the brachiocephalic vein is a vein and not a trunk, right? So we have the superficial temporal vein there. We have the internal and external carotid, which drains into the right brachiocephalic vein, which is also joined by what's this vein here? That's the right subclavian vein. Yep, and it all goes into the superior vena cava. All right, let's do a quick pop quiz. So I want you to try to answer these aloud or in your head. So first of all, what is this structure called right here? I hope you said valve. Yeah, this is a valve, and this is a valve. And then what is the whole interior part of this called? It's the same for each of these. I hope you said tunica intima. And then what is this tunica intima made out of? What are those cells? Endothelial cells. Yes. Okay. Let's keep moving. But first, let me tell you a little bit about endothelial cells. These cells form a single layer of simple squamous epithelium that provides a smooth, friction-reduced lining in the inner part of blood vessels. All right. 2 more questions. What is this red section here of the blood vessel? And it's quite thick on this one here. What is it called? It's the tunica media. And so that makes this vessel here, since it's very thick, it's an artery, and arteries actually need a blood supply. So what do you think this is called? A lot of people might say capillaries, but it's not. It's actually called the vasa vasorum. And it kind of sounds like a Harry Potter spell, but this is what supplies large blood vessels with the nutrients they need to actually survive. We should probably cover the histology. So the histology of veins and arteries reveals key structural differences that are essential for their distinct functions in the circulatory system. Under normal H&E stain at 200x magnification, an artery displays a thick tunica media comprised of small muscle cells and elastic fibers, which provide strength and elasticity to withstand high pressure. In contrast, a vein's tunica media is much thinner and with fewer muscle cells. It reflects its role in carrying blood at lower pressure. This image shows the same kind of structures under a different kind of dye, so we can actually see the elastic fibers a little more easily. So they appear as long dark strands, and this highlights the dense elastic lamina in the arteries. It's crucial for maintaining vascular integrity and resilience, while the veins exhibit fewer elastic fibers, correlating with their less elastic nature. So you can see here this artery looks more round, and the vein looks more collapsed. So that's another way to look at veins and arteries. And one way to tell if it's a vein or an artery is you might see some red blood cells in there. All right, now let's focus on some key abdominal arteries that you'll see in the exam. There are many other important arteries in the abdominal region, but these are the ones that you'll be tested on. First, let's start with the hepatic artery. The hepatic artery is a vital blood supply that supplies oxygenated blood to the liver. It branches off from the common hepatic artery, which is a part of the celiac trunk. Next, we have the gastric artery. This artery supplies blood to the stomach. Specifically, the left gastric artery is a branch of the celiac trunk, and it runs along the lesser curvature of the stomach. Splenic artery is another important vessel. It supplies blood to the spleen and also gives off branches to the pancreas and stomach. It originates from the splenic trunk as well. Moving on, the renal arteries are crucial for supplying blood to the kidneys. Each kidney receives blood from a renal artery, which branches off directly from the abdominal aorta. Lastly, the mesenteric arteries include the superior mesenteric artery and the inferior mesenteric artery. The superior mesenteric artery supplies blood to most of the small intestine and part of the large intestine, while the inferior mesenteric artery supplies the distal part of the large intestines. And then we branch off into the legs, but first let's cover the veins in the abdomen. The veins in the abdomen are very similar to the arteries. So we have the hepatic vein here. It provides blood to the liver, and it's a part of a portal system, so there's a capillary bed in the liver processing the digested nutrients moving from the intestines and stomach. And so we have a blood supply, hepatic portal vein here, and the hepatic vein there. Then we have the gastric vein, which is right here, and it's collecting blood from the stomach that has absorbed nutrients. And then we have the splenic vein here, which drains the spleen, the stomach, and some of the pancreas. And then we have the mesenteric veins here, which are draining blood from the intestines. And then we have our renal veins. So it's looking pretty similar. Now let's move on to the legs. First, let's go up our aorta. So blood is coming down here through the thoracic aorta, through the diaphragm, and then we get into the abdominal aorta, and it splits here. And it splits into the right and left common iliac artery. And then further down the leg, it splits again to the external iliac and internal iliac arteries. Then we get the femoral artery. So we covered the blood supply, and now let's cover the venous return. So we have the longest vein in the human body here, the great saphenous vein, and we have the femoral vein right here along the femur. Those merge together to form the right external iliac vein, and you can see here is the right internal iliac vein. And those merge to form the right common iliac, which then merges to form the inferior vena cava. So blood pressure is a vital sign that provides critical insight into the health of our cardiovascular system. Imagine the heart as a powerful pump, continuously pushing blood through the intricate network of blood vessels to deliver oxygen and nutrients to every cell in the body. Blood pressure is the force that this circulating blood exerts against the walls of the arteries. It is measured in millimeters of mercury and recorded with two numbers: systolic pressure, which occurs when the heart contracts and pumps blood, and diastolic pressure, which occurs when the heart relaxes. A sphygmomanometer, often accompanied by a stethoscope, is the instrument used to measure blood pressure. Normal blood pressure for an adult is typically 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury. Maintaining optimal blood pressure is crucial, as high or low values can lead to significant health issues. High blood pressure, or hypertension, can damage arteries, strain the heart, and increase the risk of heart attack and stroke. Conversely, low blood pressure, or hypotension, can lead to dizziness, fainting, and inadequate blood flow to organs. Interestingly, our blood pressure can vary throughout the day due to factors such as stress, physical activity, and even the food we eat. Understanding blood pressure and how to manage it through lifestyle choices and medical interventions is key to preserving cardiovascular health and overall well-being. Now let's discuss the regulation of blood pressure, which is influenced by body temperature, hormones, body position, and the things we eat. This is a key concept in homeostasis. We want to have the best blood pressure so our organs have good blood perfusion. So each one of these factors will influence blood pressure. Remember, blood pressure is the force that blood exerts on blood vessels. So if there is a lot of fluid in your blood vessels, that can increase your blood pressure. And if there is less fluid, then it will lower pressure. If your blood vessels constrict, that will increase pressure. And if they dilate, they will lower pressure. So here are a few things that can change those factors. Body temperature: when you're hot, blood vessels dilate. It's called vasodilation, and this releases heat and lowers blood pressure. When cold vessels constrict, it's called vasoconstriction, to conserve heat, raising blood pressure. There are some hormones that also influence blood pressure. Some key hormones include adrenaline or noradrenaline, which can increase the heart rate and cause vasoconstriction, which will increase the blood pressure. Aldosterone, which increases blood volume and pressure by retaining sodium and water. Same with antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic means you're not losing your fluids, which also increases blood pressure and volume. There's also the position you're in. So if you're standing, this can cause blood to pool in your legs, temporarily lowering blood pressure. Your body compensates by constricting blood vessels and increasing heart rate, while lying down can redistribute blood evenly, often lowering blood pressure. Now lastly, we have food and drugs that can influence your blood pressure. So if you're eating something high in sodium, so like you just had 10 cases of large fries from McDonald's, then you're probably going to have a little high blood pressure for a little bit because your body is retaining that water. You have high sodium, which retains water in your blood. Now caffeine raises blood pressure temporarily. So if you have 10 cups of coffee, your blood pressure is going to go up, and that's because we have an increased heart rate and vasoconstriction. It kind of acts like adrenaline. Understanding blood pressure is really important. So we have hypertension, which is high blood pressure, and it can be caused by lifestyle factors, genetics, and chronic conditions. It can cause damage to arteries, the heart, kidneys, and the eyes. And to manage that, you can change lifestyle conditions and use medication. Hypotension is low blood pressure, and it may result from dehydration, a large amount of blood loss, heart issues, or endocrine disorders. It can lead to dizziness, fainting, and it can be managed through hydration, medication, and addressing underlying conditions. To accurately measure blood pressure, first you have to locate the brachial pulse with 2 fingers. Then place a calibrated manual sphygmomanometer. And yes, you'll need to know how to spell sphygmomanometer. Sphygmo means pulse, and manometer means pressure measurer. So it's a pulse pressure measurer. So place that on the subject's arm and pump up the cuff to approximately 160 millimeters of mercury. Then use the stethoscope, place it distally to the cuff over the brachial artery, and listen to Korsakoff sounds. Those are the sounds that happen when you apply pressure to the artery and you get turbulent flow of blood. So, slowly release the cuff pressure and listen for that first Korsakoff sound. Record that pressure. So look at the pressure gauge and record that pressure, and that'll be your systolic pressure, or the heart contracting pressure. Continue to listen until the final Korsakoff sound and record that pressure. That will be your diastolic pressure. These measurements should be recorded along with pulse pressure, which is the difference between the systolic and diastolic pressures. It is indicative of arterial health. Now there's another calculation you can do. It is the mean arterial pressure, or a MAP, which can be calculated using the formula MAP is equal to diastolic pressure plus 1/3 of pulse pressure. It represents the average pressure in your arteries during one cardiac cycle, and it's essential for ensuring adequate blood flow to the organs with normal values, typically between 70 and 100 millimeters of mercury. Now that you know how to take a good blood pressure, practice finding pulses on your arm. Try and find the radial and brachial pulse, and that is over your radial artery close to your wrist and your brachial artery right around your bicep. And you can use the internet for resources to find those pulses. And that covers the veins, arteries, and blood pressure. Thanks for staying tuned, and I'll see you later.